That's what I tell myself to cope with and deal. Try to convince myself these several years were not even real. Try to convince myself the media was making this up. That if I wait here, Morpheus will be waking me up. But instead I'm in my bed, game over. I ain't even drank nothing, but I got a hangover. First I was drunk from the lies they were feeding me. Then I sobered up and realized they were mistreating me. I stumbled out my bed and tried my best to gain some sense of it. The reasons for the cover-up, the reasons for the censorship. Now I realize that Uncle Sam was not befriending me. He was only using me to be friends with you.
It's July 31st, 2011. Sunday edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. This is the final segment. And before I let Robert continue where he was, I want him to give out his website again, because, again, for me, it's very important that you guys hear his website and go get the book. It's important to, as I've said before, it's very important to have a physical copy of this stuff, because don't depend on e-books and e-readers, because they could do an EMP burst and there goes all your knowledge. So it's better to always have a physical copy of it. And this book's very important to have because it talks about subjects and gives you references to other books so you can go do the research that Robert did himself. So, Robert, go ahead and give him the website again.
Yeah, it's www.robertkwilcox.com. Or you can go to Amazon and put my name in there, Robert K. Wilcox, and you'll see all my books. Target Patton for sure.
Yeah, I suggest you get, if you buy, I buy a couple of Robert's books because he's got, like he said, he's got 10 different books there, and his work is incredible. But if you buy only one, I would at least recommend Target Patton, because it's one of the biggest pieces of hidden history you could ever find. Getting back into Patton being in the hospital, Robert, and guys, forgive me if my throat's a little dry. My throat's been dry all day, so if my voice is a little crackly, I apologize. But getting back into Patton, he was in the hospital. He was rallying enough to the point where they were going to put him on, a plane and fly him back from Germany into the United States for further treatment. Now, as you said, back in the 40s, that's not like it is today, where you just get thrown on a jet and whisked. This was, you're talking to, probably back then it probably would have been at least like a 12, 13-hour flight, I'm guessing, somewhere around there. I'm guessing they probably would have had to land somewhere and stop maybe, because I don't know if, I don't think they did mid-air refueling back in the 40s. So it would have been a hell of a trip for him. He would, so to be that stable, so to go where the doctors thought that he could go through that, and then suddenly he dies.
Yeah, that's what happened. Within 24 hours, as they're readying him to get on the plane, literally packing his bags, he had a relapse. And what happened was he had embolisms in his blood. Now, that does happen to people, and Patton, in fact, had embolisms back back when he'd been kicked by a horse. These are little blood clots, and they can stop your heart, they can go to your brain, and so on. What is suspicious about it is that he didn't have them before, and suddenly, when he's ready to go, suddenly he gets this. And as we look at this further. What Bazada told me was, since they didn't kill him at the accident, somebody else, Bazada tried with his accomplice, his NKVD guy, to go in a hospital. And by the way, in a hospital, very easy to get into a room. You just put on a doctor's coat and so on. And easy to give him an injection. It's done through the needle's already there. Easy to spray something through a window, if in fact there was a window there. I've never been able to tell. I've been told there was and there wasn't. But the strange thing is that he has this sudden relapse and he dies, and that's it. That's how Patton died. And it was on the 22nd of December, not on the 9th, when the accident occurred. So that's how Patton died. Getting back to the motivations, Patton was the guy wanted to start World War III. We had just been through the worst war in the history of the world. I'm sorry?
No, I've said this before. Go on.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people have argued this point with me and told me that there's no way. But if you go research it, he wanted to go to war with the Russians.
Oh, that's absolutely the fact. That's one of the reasons that at the end of the war, on the very day the war ended, he called all the reporters together and he said, as I said earlier, he said, we came here to liberate people, and we did so, and we've given them a worse tyranny, and that's the Russians. And the Russians knew this. I mean, he was fighting with their top general. He was that is ridiculous if anybody said that he didn't. That's one of the big things that Patton wanted to do.
I've had this argument with supposed investigators, not on air, but my personal life. A few investigators that I know, I've had them tell me that, and I that's because they're just not paying attention. They just haven't done the research. You could see he really wanted to start World War III. Didn't he get into it with a Russian general at some sort of ball or something?
Absolutely. Molotov was the big general at that time. I think that was his name, Molotov. I may be wrong on that one. I'm blanking on his name. But, they would have these big parades, and it was almost farcical. The big Russian would come there, and he would have all of his medals, so Patton would run and get his medals, and they actually Patton chased him through a park and so on in cars so that he could get a better position. The Russians hated Patton, and that's a big factor in this. Because in addition to Bazada, who confessed to me about how he had done it and so on, I also found an intelligence officer who was working with Patton. He was part of Patton's intelligence until the war ended, and then he became a CIC. Well, he was always a CIC investigator, but he was liaisoning with the Eastern Europeans. And he uncovered the plot. And from his side, what he uncovered was that Stalin had ordered Patton's death, and that the NKVD should kill him. And you got to understand, Stalin had FDR in his back pocket. He was running circles around FDR.
He called him Uncle Joe.
Yeah, he called him Uncle Joe, and he had. FDR had given him Eastern Europe, and that was all taken care of. The only person in Stalin's way was Patton, who wanted to start World War III. There's a famous speech where one of the big deal guys in the administration comes and tries to calm Patton down, and they argue. And Patton, he says, "You can't say this. We can't be talking like this. The Russians are our allies. We've got to be nice to them." And Patton says, "Hell, allies." He said, "You give me my army back right now, and I'll have beaten them in 6 weeks." And the reason he said that was not stupid. At that time, he had witnessed how the Russians were being supplied by ox cart. They didn't have any. They were completely spent, and everything they had, we had given them. We could have beaten them at that time, and possibly you wouldn't have had the Cold War, which in total tally probably killed more people than any war we've ever had.
And made tons of money for the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower would later warn us about.
Yeah, absolutely. There are many things to say here, but anyway, no question. To me, that's the biggest motive of all, along with the fact that he was going to tell these secrets. There were a lot of people, Eisenhower included, who could look the other way and say, "Well, too bad. I'm sorry the guy died, but whew, that was a close one," because he had. And then there were other aspects. One of the things that really made prisoners that we liberated back to Russia, and Russia was going to give our prisoners back to America. But he didn't do it.
Robert, your line cut out, so I want you to repeat that because that's one of the most important things, because I was talking to you about this during the break. Go ahead and repeat that again, what you just said about the prisoners of war.
One of the deals that we made with the Russians was that those Russians who we liberated in our sectors would be sent back to Russia. And conversely, the Russians would send back our guys to our sectors. but they didn't do it. Now, they may have done it in some cases, but they kept American POWs there. To this day, we still don't know how many, but the numbers are not small. They're up there. 5, 10, 20,000 men may have been kept there. Americans may have been kept there. A lot of men were kept there and died in Russian gulags because of this. Patton knew about this. He also knew that the Russians who were going to be sent back were going to be killed. Patton's Stalin's policy was these guys, they gave up for whatever reason, we're going to kill them, and they would be sent to gulags too. Some of the guys who were going to be repatriated back, some of the Russians to be repatriated back, actually committed suicide. Patton knew about all this, and he was livid about it. He was livid about the Americans who weren't being brought back. So there are many, many motive is the easiest part of this story. Motive is the easiest part. There were many reasons that Patton should have been murdered. Now, I think we could go to the missing reports. That's when I got in on this. One of the first two things I did.
I'll have you pick up on the reports because we're going to the top of the hour break, and I'll have you pick up. I'll let you get into the reports in depth on the other side of the break. Okay. And you also investigated the car crash, the car itself that was involved in the car crash.
Yes. And
that's another interesting segment in itself. So we'll get into that when we come back. Guys, stay tuned. I have another hour with Robert Wilcox. We'll be right back.